Octopath Traveler is a Nintendo Switch JRPG developed by Square Enix that was released in 2018 and later on Steam in 2019. So it's not really a Nintendo Switch JRPG, but that just rolls off the tongue better. Nintendo Switch JRPG, ooh. From what I could gather, many people who worked on Square Enix's Bravely Default came in to work on this game as another one of their extra RPGs outside of Final Fantasy. Just like The World Ends With You, a game I love and you should play because if you don't, I might cry. If you couldn't tell, my experiences with Square Enix tend to stem from their non-Final Fantasy forays, with their biggest franchise I've experienced the most being Kingdom Hearts. That being said, Octopath Traveler was a game that caught my eye right at its initial reveal because for one, the whole concept of having 8 main protagonists with their own stories was something I had never seen before, and that's always a plus. And 2, the game looked very, bright, yet beautiful all the same. The HD pixel art on top of 3D backgrounds worked wonders, looking just like a SNES RPG in a modern era. Lo and behold, that's exactly what was intended, as this game is meant to harken back to classics such as Chrono Trigger, Secret of Mana, and most apparent, Final Fantasy, specifically the ones that were released on the SNES. Along with some modern additions and technological advances, Octopath Traveler sets out to capture the magic that made those RPGs of the time as magical as they were for a new audience, culminating in the game we're looking at today. Of course, it would take me a while to get to it, but that's not to say the game was poorly received or anything, far from it. Critics ate this game up, earning great review scores across the board and selling out rather quickly, hence why it took me some time to get around to it. I wanted to buy it but could never find it, so over time I started to get caught up in other games that I was, shocker, actually able to buy. But it's a new day, or new year I should say, since we're reviewing a 2018 game in 2021. Octopath is now in my hands and I played it from beginning to end, doing nearly every single side quest at that. I sunk plenty of hours into this game and I have a lot to say given my personal tastes when it comes to RPGs. As you've most likely deduced from my review lineup, this is the first RPG we're looking at to feature a turn-based battle system. And that's not entirely an accident. I may be an RPG guy, but I much prefer one whose battle system is action-oriented. So it'll be interesting to go into this game not only with that sort of bias, but also as someone who, at this point in time, has never finished a Final Fantasy game. Already I know what some of you are thinking. Okay, Zafre, I love you, you're super hot and I adore your videos, but what the hell? You've never finished a Final Fantasy game? Yeah, I've talked about it on Twitter a couple of times, but I've been a little afraid to bring it up on my much bigger YouTube platform, but you all are an understanding audience, right? Surely this won't ruin my credibility or anything. Alright, cat's out of the bag, but allow me to explain my reasoning for this, as it boils down to 3 big reasons. Reason number 1, I just didn't have the time. When I was starting to get into Tales, I wanted to dedicate a majority of my time to getting into the series as a whole and become a professional on it. I'd play other JRPGs along the way, and after I did all I could because, well, you know, half of the series is Japan exclusive, but I didn't want Final Fantasy to be something I picked and chose from. Whenever I got to it, I wanted to be completely invested and take my time to understand the franchise's entirety, inside and out, just like I did with Tales. But surely I knew about Final Fantasy long before Tales, right? Correct, and I did try getting into it a couple of times, but Reason number 2, I was young, therefore much more impatient, and my hatred towards random encounters was at an all-time high. The furthest I ever got in a Final Fantasy game was with Final Fantasy VI, and I just couldn't take the random encounters anymore. I was lost, had no idea what to do, and was constantly thrown into battle after battle, only raising my frustration more and more to the point where I stopped playing and haven't gone back since. That's not to say I didn't like the game as a whole. Please don't go around thinking that I hate Final Fantasy VI. This design choice just got on my nerves too much. Also, again, I was younger, so please judge me reasonably. Now that my desire to experience the game has returned, I just don't have the time, and there are other games queued up for me to look at before I give the series the good old college try again. But even still, as a kid, you'd think that battling would be fun, but if my distaste for random encounters was heightened at a younger age, then so too was my distaste towards turn-based combat. That's reason number 3, by the way. I don't care for turn-based combat. That's not to say I immediately dislike an RPG for using turn-based combat, because after all, I love Pokemon, I love Chrono Trigger, I love Mario and Luigi, so on and so forth. But the thing is, these games always bring some sort of spin to the turn-based table. With Pokemon, the customization is through the roof since you're given literal hundreds of party members to choose from, all being completely customizable in their own right. Chrono Trigger takes enemy positioning into consideration on top of the action battle meter constantly filling, so while it's turn-based, you still have to think on your toes, bringing the battle system ridiculously close to one that's in real time. And of course, the Mario and Luigi series, or Mario RPGs in general, all have button prompts that you have to time with your attacks for extra damage, as well as using these prompts to dodge incoming attacks, keeping me engaged as a result while emphasizing, say it with me, my personal skill. I find that turn-based combat puts a lot more of a focus on the numbers and stats, meaning that if you're not at the level the game says you need to be for a particular moment in the game, you better get to that level or you're not moving forward, simple as that. And I don't like that design mentality. As someone who grew up playing platformers, I was brought into this form of media under the mindset that no matter what, it always comes down to me. I can get better, and only by doing that will I win. The journey to the end isn't necessarily a time sink, but rather a growth of appreciation for the game's mechanics, understanding them on a deeper level, and using them to win. It's why I love my favorite RPGs on the astronomical level I do, because they take that very concept to the extreme, and why I don't love turn-based combat, because it's like they go against that philosophy. When an enemy goes to attack me in Tales of Exilia, I can dodge it with proper timing and recognition of the enemy's pattern. When an enemy goes to attack me in Final Fantasy VI, I have to roll the dice and hope my stats turn the odds in my favor. I don't like that, especially later on when enemies get bigger, more powerful attacks. It just leads to frustration. So then the question becomes, why was I so drawn to Octopath knowing that it would follow the turn-based formula Square Enix loves so damn much? Well, other than the two non-gameplay reasons I specified earlier, it was because of this little thing. BP. From what I could tell, this was Octopath's twist to the turn-based combat, and one that would pave the way for player skill to be the ultimate factor in who comes out of battles on top. And if this twist were prevalent and developed enough, it could be what helps make this game stand alongside some of my favorite games that do feature turn-based combat. I hope all this set the scenery enough and explained the kind of person I am coming into this very different RPG than we've covered so far in this review series. As someone not too big on many of the design choices made in this so-called golden era of RPGs, yet has the potential to love the games these choices are made in all the same, can Octopath Traveler win me over, and if so, to what extent? Ladies, gentlemen, and everyone in between, let's find that out as we finally dive into the revolutionary review for Octopath Traveler. Like stated earlier, the game immediately grabbed my attention with its graphical prowess, and that feeling never left over the course of my playthrough. Good lord, this game is gorgeous, as it features a graphical aesthetic the team behind the game refers to as HD 2D. It combines the sprite work seen in SNES RPGs with polygonal environments and high-definition effects to make for this sort of pop-up book feel, and it all works wonders. The sprites are incredibly detailed, as each main character is visually distinct and charming in and of themselves, even if I did feel the amount of sprites each character had was admittedly small. I found in many cases that characters weren't able to express themselves as much as they could have, particularly in cutscenes which are already pretty static. And while we're on negatives, my only other major graphical gripe was the bloom effect. It's just too much. The game defaults to having corner shadows to compensate, but I thought this looked tacky, so in the middle of my third chapter 1, I turned it off as well as the corner map for a cleaner HUD. Even still, the game is just way too bright in many instances, so apologies if this is hard for some of you to look at. I got used to it eventually, but you get the point. Back to the positives, using HD effects in combination with the polygonal environments made for a surprisingly great combo. Then with spells and battle effects, they're all a feast for the eyes while showcasing their raw power. The colors definitely helped, as a vibrant palette was a necessity with how bright everything is, which this game delivers on. As for performance, the game runs at 720p and 30 frames per second, which is pretty good, but slightly disheartening when you see the much higher resolution and 60 FPS possible on the PC version. So if you have the hardware, I'd recommend that version of the game. Of course, the sky is blue, grass is green, and my computer's a potato, so I didn't have a choice. I've gotta be honest though, I'm surprised that the Switch couldn't even get this game running at 60 frames, and I want to say that the game should have been optimized for this a bit better. But in all fairness, I don't really know much about the development process in that aspect. The game has a lot of graphical effects that push its engine quite a bit, so on top of the game rarely dipping from its frame rate, I was still visually pleased and impressed, so I won't be too petty. I'll just stay in my lane, making mediocre videos. This game has a decent amount of voice acting, and it's really good. There are tons of incredibly talented people behind the voices featured in this game, and a small detail I loved was how the game gave different people on the many corners of the world their own speech patterns, dialect, and accents. This immersed me a ton, making this fantasy setting feel that much more alive. I remember Xenoblade 2 did this as well, and I loved it there, so I love it here. My only issue with the voice acting is that there isn't much of it. It honestly felt like half of the game wasn't voiced, not including side quests and optional scenes, of course. Many mandatory scenes stuck with voice clips, which was so lame considering how great the voice acting is overall. Not to mention, I don't really like voice clips. They take me out of the experience every single time, and at that point, I'd rather the characters not speak at all. It's fine when it's a quick word or two or even a grunt, but many clips here are full-on sentences, and it's super distracting. Also, why are some scenes half-voiced? Like, they'll either start off not being voiced, then start to get full voice acting, or vice versa, which is just Huh? I understand that this game didn't have the biggest budget, but it never felt as apparent as it was here, especially when you compare it to the other major audio portion of the presentation, the soundtrack. My god, the soundtrack is so good. Yasunori Nishiki, the game's composer, said in a note on the official Nintendo website, "My goal was to create a soundtrack with memorable melodies and lavish soundscapes that incorporated live orchestral performances. From the main theme to battle and cutscene music, I strove for clear melodies and powerful yet not overly complex songs that would rise to the level of the evolved HD 2D graphics." I love this quote, as it perfectly encapsulates why this soundtrack works as well as it does, let alone for the game itself. The sound quality reaches such a high caliber with the live, expertly played instruments, fitting the atmosphere and general mood for whatever scenario each piece plays in, but on the foundation of a catchy melody to allow for memorability. I found myself humming nearly every song as they became instantly recognizable after listening to them just once. And thanks to how freaking long video editing takes, I get to listen to the soundtrack even more, which is always a plus. I was very surprised to find this soundtrack available for purchase on iTunes for a measly $20. You better believe I jumped on that, and I recommend you support the official release as well since it's so readily available for a great price. The links to support the official release, as well as the list of songs I will play over the course of the video, are as always linked in the description. There's also an official remix album that acts as dessert to the delicious meal that is Octopath's soundtrack. This is a criminally small, god-tier album to go alongside the already phenomenal one the base game uses, so I'm glad the Octopath team is aware of how good their game's music is to the point where we got this as well. This will also be linked in the description below. I've noticed that the more I review games, the more I tend to care and talk about the soundtrack. Not like I didn't care before this whole review series, but as I force myself to take a deeper look at whatever game I'm covering, I notice how much love is put into this particular aspect across the board. I won't speak for everyone, but personally, music tends to play the most important role in the game's presentation, as it lends the largest hand in terms of getting me immersed into the experience, what I feel to be a game's presentation's entire goal. I don't know why I thought of that, but my guess Octopath's music is so good that it gets me thinking about these things, you know? Didn't want to jump on this opinion too quickly, but after almost 60 hours of playtime, I'm just gonna say it, this is yet another one of my favorite video game soundtracks. And along with this, the voice acting is stellar, and the graphics combine many different elements to create a breathtaking game to both look at and listen to. This game is one of the best I've talked about on this channel from a presentational standpoint, so as the first thing to draw me into this game as a whole, I'm happy to report that it only became more impressive as I played through the game. Can I say the same about this game's story, especially considering how different this game approaches the very subject? Let's talk about it. Now, if you haven't played this game before, then you might be a little confused by the title of this segment. 8 Tales? Isn't it supposed to be 9 Tales, Mr. Revolution? Octopath Traveler approaches the story in a bit of a different manner, having 8 main characters all sporting their own mini-stories spread over the course of 4 chapters each. You start the game picking one character based off of a brief description to act as your protagonist, then proceed to find the location of the next character in order to hear the beginning of their story, rinse and repeat until you found all 8 characters and have experienced all of their first chapters, then move on to specific locations on the map to continue their stories from there all the way until the end. You'd think that this would make my job a lot harder, but it actually proved to be quite the opposite, as all I have to do now is give a quick briefing on everyone's individual stories. So without further ado, this is... Ophelia's father is dying and her sister was supposed to go on a pilgrimage but can't bring herself to leave his side. Ophelia decides to leave in her stead. Cyrus got involved in a bit of a misunderstood scandal and has been sent away from the academy he teaches at, but that's okay because he's trying to track down some satanic book or something. This makes a lot more sense in the context of the game, just throwing that out there. Tressa, aka Best Girl, kicks some pirates' asses, then realizes that she wants to go out into the world and travel. She does. It's great. Olberic was betrayed and has gone to a remote village to sort of run away from his past, but it comes back to haunt him and he goes on a quest to find and confront his old ally turned traitor. Primrose reminds you that this game is rated T for teen, as she's now the property of some old creep as she waits to find and kill the men responsible for her father's death. She finds one and her quest for revenge begins. Alfin's just a chill apothecary who goes out to help people. The most basic setup for the most basic character. Kind of fitting, wouldn't you say? Therian is a thief from a town on the cliffside who falls into a trap and gets forced into finding 3 dragon stones. He has to do this, otherwise he'll be stuck with this really embarrassing bangle on his arm which other thieves will laugh at him for, and that ain't gonna fly. And finally, Hannet realizes that her master has gone missing, so she goes on a journey to find him. Simple, clean, done. You got all that? No? Well, that's too bad. We're getting into the actual critiquing now. Honestly, I thought this approach to storytelling was weird at first, but over time, I grew to like it. While this format doesn't offer the same level of cohesion as a single, more fleshed out narrative, that's okay. This is different, and different is awesome. It helps that I'm a fan of just about every single one of these mini-stories. Some are definitely better than others, but I didn't find one to be flat out bad. They all had a great beginning and premise, interesting conflicts over the course of their chapters, and satisfying conclusions for the most part. My favorite stories would have to have been Therian, Ophelia, and Olberix. I thought these had the most satisfying build-up the whole way through, the best villains, and the best final moments. The former two so much so that their final bosses even had dialogue mid-battle, which I thought was really cool, and something that I wish a couple of other characters had as well. To be honest, like I somewhat alluded to earlier, some of these stories fell a little flat in their final moments. The characters' chapters all fall into the same formula of entering a town, getting some kind of conflict, going into a dungeon, and fighting a boss, but a couple of the characters' final chapters felt like they didn't need to follow this same template. Tressa's final boss, for example, was so unneeded that they literally pulled some random villain out of their asses at the last moment in order to give her some kind of boss. It just ended up feeling unsatisfying or unnecessary, so I wish the writing team didn't feel the need to have to check off some boxes or whatever. You know what box I wish they did check off though? Party interaction, am I right, boys? You know, because there's none. Okay, that's kind of a lie. This game basically takes Tales' skits and puts them in this game. In anyone's second chapter onward, characters will have one-on-one conversations with each other after specific story beats, and these are great. Why aren't there more? Heck, after you do one character's chapter 4, you'll start getting more skits, or as this game calls them, travel banter with multiple characters. And these are even better. Again, why aren't there more of these? Or better yet, why don't the characters interact in the main story? Travel banter is completely optional, so if you for some reason choose not to watch these, your characters will never talk to each other. In everyone's chapter 1, literally the only time these characters acknowledge each other's existence is when you find them and they're all like, yo, what it do, fam? I'm about to do this dope ass thing or whatever, trying to come through, and that's it. Do they hate each other? Why is Therian helping Ophelia with her pilgrimage, especially when he's a character established to not trust anyone? The game never answers any of these, and even in the travel banter, they just talk like everything's normal. Give us justification for you all traveling as a group. I'm so confused. This is my biggest issue with everything regarding the game's story. It just comes across as lazy and not taking the storytelling concept to the level it needs to be. But again, I really do like the idea, especially because having mini stories that focus on the characters separately allows for the game to flesh them out to a level I constantly yearn for in my JRPGs. Octopath Traveler's cast, lack of party banter aside, is phenomenal. Therian is who I chose at the beginning of the game, and due to a really stupid game design choice I'll address when the time to talk about gameplay arises, he really grew on me. He was betrayed by a trusted ally and as a result has refused to let anyone in. Already I was able to relate with him quite a bit because I too wield the superpower that is trust issues. Watching as he slowly starts to let down his walls was very satisfying to see, and even watching as he made nice with a few of the party members in the travel banter was great. And Tressa's just about on the same plane as Therian. These two are my favorites without a doubt. She's such an adventurous person who sees the value in many things others would discard, and watching her go on her journey and falling in love with traveling was so enjoyable. I don't want to give every single one of these main characters special highlights, I just wanted to talk about my two favorites, but I really do love every single one of them. Again, it sucks that they don't talk with each other, as that would have taken their characterization to even greater heights, but the fact that I love them as much as I do just based on their individual aspects alone should speak volumes as to how well written they all are. At this point I'd comment on the game's ending, but really once you beat everyone's final chapters, that's kind of it. After you do your selected protagonist's final chapter in particular, the game will roll the credits, and since I happened to do my protagonist's final chapter second, that came off as a weird choice. But yeah, the game just sorta ends. Or does it? Turns out that there's a super secret post-game dungeon that acts as the true finale to the game. It is 100% optional though, as you'll have to complete 2 specific side quests, and it's classified as a post-game dungeon. In normal circumstances, I still would have gone out of my way to do it, but not this time. Why not? Again, this kinda trickles into the gameplay side of things, so we'll hold off on the specifics for now, but I will say that I was a little disappointed this big finale wasn't mandatory. After finishing everyone's chapters, there was no fanfare, the game just stopped, and I was sitting there like, oh, I'm done. Woo! I don't know, it feels like they didn't know how to end the game in some big way other than the optional post-game dungeon, which was a bit of a letdown. Individually, I was satisfied with the different stories' endings, but you get the point. I think that's all I've got on the game's story though. Overall, I like it, although there's definite room for improvement. The characters needed to interact more, which would have helped lay out their justifications for traveling together, and there should have been a mandatory big ending to wrap it all up, because as it stands, the game abruptly ends and that's never fun. However, this unique approach to the overall narrative made for some great moments and excellent characterization, as the cast, regardless of their failure to acknowledge one another, is full of outstanding characters. Not to mention their stories in and of themselves proved to be interesting at worst and a thrill ride at best. It took me a bit to warm up to the idea, but Octopath's stories won me over in the end despite the flaws. they get a thumbs up from your boy. I've been spilling into the gameplay aspects of this title a bit already, so why delay this any further and just jump right in? More specifically starting with everything outside of battling, that's what I was gonna say. Occasionally, I like to switch it up and save the battle system for last. Since that was one of the biggest points of interest diving into this game, I'm of course gonna do just that. First, let's talk about all the gameplay outside of battling, starting with the towns, overworld, and dungeons. Towns are a bit hard to screw up, and thankfully this game doesn't do just that. They're good. They vary in size and scope as well as have different people to talk to, although there admittedly weren't too many big standout landmarks to really differentiate these places. Some areas had a church or whatever, some had their dungeon be more apparent than others, but besides that, Outside of side questing, I didn't feel too much of a need to return to these areas, but in all fairness, I did return to these areas quite a bit because, as stated earlier in the video, I did do nearly every single side quest in the game. Sadly, these didn't reward me with much in the way of experience, but I was compensated with in-game currency and useful items, so I guess I can't be too mad. These side quests were pretty basic, however, being much more interested in the stories they had to tell, as you'd go fetch an item, defeat a monster, or use the necessary path action. Path actions are special moves that different characters can use in the overworld unique to themselves that allow you to interact with people or different objects. To give some examples, Tressa's path action is to purchase items from NPCs, Cyrus' path action allows for him to scrutinize an NPC in order to gain information on the character and hopefully a useful item, and Primrose's path action is to lure an NPC to follow her so that she can use them in battle. Every single party member has one, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're all, shall we say, unique. Cyrus' path action boils down to getting information on an NPC with varying percentages on whether or not it'll work, but Alphen's path action is essentially the same thing, but guaranteed to work every single time. What determines whether or not he can even get the option to gather information is based on what level you are in correlation to the required level needed to gain info on the specific person, meaning Alphen's path action is simply the better choice in almost every instance. After all, if you fail at a path action that has a % chance of working enough times, you'll lower your reputation in town, meaning you won't be able to use path actions on anyone unless you pay a fee to the barkeeper in order to bring your reputation back up. As a result, I found myself playing it safe in many instances and sticking with the reliable path actions over the course of the game. If the percentage wasn't high enough on Therian's thief path action, I'd just purchase the item with Tressa. If I couldn't allure an NPC with Primrose, I'd just guide them with Ophelia. You get the picture. I don't like this, as it makes some characters feel less useful in most instances. Sure, there are some NPCs that require you to use one path action over the other, but for the vast majority, you're given the choice, and odds are you're just gonna play it safe. I would have much preferred everyone getting their own unique path action in order to see the development team stretch those creative muscles a bit more. But yeah, most of the time, these will end up being the key while side questing, and in many instances, side quests will even have multiple ways to go about them since you have 8 path actions at your disposal. You're allowed to get creative, and I like this sense of freedom a lot. I do think the game could benefit from having some kind of log of all the NPCs you've gained text blurbs of though, as the side quests sort of rely on you remembering what specific characters are looking for and whatnot. Thankfully, I have the internet to guide and remind me what exactly I need, but having some sort of log to keep track of all the charming text blurbs in-game felt like an obvious inclusion, and I'm surprised something like it isn't here. The overworld is okay. It's pretty linear, featuring winding paths that boil down to a straight line, with the occasional branching path that either leads to a different chunk of the map or a treasure chest. These weren't too engaging to travel through, but they weren't too annoying either, well, for the most part. There's one gameplay element that makes exploration a bit of a pain, but I'll hold off on that just a bit longer. I will say that while the overworld is inherently pretty linear, the game doesn't block off any high-level areas on the map. You can technically go wherever the hell you want unless it's a dungeon specifically for a character's chapter. Again, I love this sense of freedom, as there's no reason to go to these higher level areas, but it's just nice to have the option, you know? It's as if the game respects me enough to where it doesn't feel the need to hold my hand. It'll tell me what the recommended level for the area is, then leave the rest to me, guiding me to where I'm supposed to go without flat out forcing me. That kind of design mentality is appreciated, although I do have to wonder why the game sometimes forces you to go through areas that feature a bit of a level jump. I had to go to a chapter whose recommended level is 24, but the area had a danger level of 31. What the hell? This wasn't too bad to be fair, but still, it seemed like an obvious oversight. Overall, the overworld is fine, if not a bit uninspired, and I think I can say the same for this game's selection of dungeons. These are incredibly linear and only ever split paths when one leads to some treasure and the other is the correct way forward. All the dungeons in this game felt the same, and I never had to solve a single puzzle over the course of the game or did some kind of set piece to differentiate one from the rest of the crowd. This was the most disappointing aspect in the exploration side of Octopath Traveler, and I would have liked something interesting. You may notice that there are purple chests here or there in my footage. Good eye! These are special chests scattered over the course of the game that are locked. How do you open them? Well, on top of the path action, every character has a unique talent. Honnet can capture and summon different beasts, Alphen can concoct different medicines during battle, and Therian can unlock purple chests. Just Therian, no one else. So if you don't have him in your party and run into a purple chest, well, that's rough, buddy. It doesn't help that these are everywhere, so lucky me that I chose Therian as my protagonist, therefore didn't need to miss out on these for a majority of my playthrough, but regardless, this was an incredibly stupid decision. Oh hey, speaking of Therian being my protagonist and very stupid decisions, this was another one. Like I said when talking about the characters, Therian really grew on me, but on top of the character being someone I felt was genuinely well written, he was locked in my party until I completed his 4th chapter. Why the hell would they do this? Therian's not even the real protagonist because there is no real protagonist. They're all the protagonists. Just because I chose him first means he's gotta stay trapped in my group? That doesn't make sense. Games that actually have a protagonist let me switch them out of the party whenever I want. What the hell is this game's deal? Because of this, by the time I was finally freed from the shackles of having my protagonist locked in my party, he was 10 levels higher than everyone else. I looked like those 12-year-olds who were playing Pokemon for the first time and use only their starter, and I ain't no scrub. It doesn't help that the characters who aren't in my active party receive 0 experience points, which is always a fun game design choice. You can't even begin to imagine how much this bothered me. I couldn't care less that I wasn't able to open purple chests when I took them out. Not to mention, this finally allowed me to fully experiment with different team builds and the varying characters' jobs. Everyone has a different starting job. Alphen's an apothecary, Honnet's a hunter, Cyrus is a scholar, so on and so forth. And on top of different battle utilities, they each have their own sets of skills. Skills are your more powerful attacks in battle, or healing, buffs, debuffs, all that sort of magical junk. And you earn more by winning battles and gaining JP, job points, which you spend on whatever skill you want. You can pick them in any order, all increasing in how much JP they cost the more you get, working towards one final super powerful skill at the end. The more skills you buy, the more supportive skills you get, which act as passive buffs or more traditional skills seen in other JRPGs. You're only able to equip 4 at a time, which gave me heavy Symphonia vibes, not just due to this limitation, but also due to them working under a similar mindset. Supportive skills in this game aren't the backbone of combat, but rather a bonus and another form of customization, given how many options you have with how few you're allowed to keep on at once. I liked it in Symphonia, and I liked it here, as it really forced me to think about which ones I wanted over others, especially considering how many options I had, since you can give your characters an extra job the further you get into the game. You'll start to discover hidden job shrines on your way to characters' further chapters, and your reward for your curiosity will be equipable jobs. Now anyone can be an apothecary, hunter, or scholar, and that goes for all of the 8 pre-established jobs, blowing customization options through the freaking roof. Not to mention, it gives the game a lot of replay value, as you can go through 2 runs of this game building your characters in a variety of different manners. Although, given the sheer size of this game, I can't imagine you'll want to immediately hop back in once it's all said and done. The game took me a little over 60 hours by the time I decided I was done with side questing, putting it on the longer side of the JRPG length spectrum. So take that as you will, but I know that personally I'm not going to be replaying this game anytime soon. These customizable jobs not only allow for a larger pool of supportive skills to choose from, but also skills to be used in combat, our final topic for today. Although you may have noticed that there don't seem to be any enemies in the overworld. How then do you engage battle? Well, and this is also the reason why I find exploration to be a bit of a pain, battles are initiated through random encounters. Fortunately, this issue isn't as big as it was the last time we ran into this sort of thing in the Revolutionary Review series, but I still stand by everything I said that contributes to why I don't like these. Obviously, I can tolerate it as I finish the game, but these still prove to be a pain the whole way through. Firstly, it discourages exploration, as a 30-second pit stop can become a 2-minute detour. Secondly, you'll occasionally catch enemies off guard, with the exact opposite being able to happen to you, potentially setting you back should you be unprepared at any moment, which leads to frustration. This leads to prevalent gameplay mechanic up to chance rather than allowing me to be accountable for this sort of thing, and that blows. Finally, sometimes I just don't want to fight, but the option to turn them off completely isn't a thing in this game. When I'm running through a low-level area and happen to get pulled into a fight, I have to wait a second for the battle to load, select the option to run away, hope the game allows for me to run since this is also a turn-based game, and then wait another second to get back into the overworld. Rinse and repeat every single time the game decides to thrust me into a fight. You can lower the encounter rate, but that's it, and that's dumb. This is, and always will be, a very dated concept that has no reason to be a thing anymore other than calling back to a time when it was required to be a thing. I don't understand why we continue to glamorize it, but obviously people like it, hence why developers still feel the need to include them, so I guess I won't dwell on it too much. Let's instead just get into the actual combat system. Like I've stated many times, this is a turn-based battle system where you control 4 party members. Every character has a basic attack where they use whatever weapon their jobs allow, skills, which we've gone over already, an option to defend, use an item, use their talent if it's an additional option in battle, or flee. The latter of which, again, being left up to chance. Woohoo, my favorite. Your options are pretty standard for the most part, but that's not to say they're totally uninteresting. Guarding guarantees your character acts earlier than usual, so on top of raising defenses, you can use this to shift the showcased turn order in your favor. Turn order is a bit weird otherwise, though. I thought it was determined by different characters' speed levels, but many times it just felt random. Here I have a character acting before my other party member with an obviously higher level of speed, so what's the deal? There's clearly some sort of background element at play here, but even looking it up, it seems like turn order is sometimes decided at random, and I, for one, find that pretty dumb. What's the point of giving my characters extra speed when it doesn't matter? Once again, a gameplay element is taken out of my control. Boy oh boy! You'll mainly be using attacks, skills, and character talents, as the name of the game is breaking enemies by targeting their specific weaknesses akin to the likes of Persona. That's pretty cool. Unlike Persona, however, many enemies will require you to target their weaknesses more than once, which would lead you to believe the process of breaking their guard takes a lot more time, but should you play your cards right and compose your team well enough, this can be a quick process, and the game's breakpoints help alleviate this potential issue as well. BP is given to your characters once at the beginning of every turn if you don't use up any, and can be used to either gain additional attacks if a normal attack is selected, or heighten the effects and powers of your skills and battle talents. The most you can use at once is 3, and should you learn how to manage your character's BP, you'll be able to dish out massive amounts of damage in a shorter amount of time, decreasing the length of longer fights. This added element to combat adds another layer of strategy along with it, and I really enjoy this feature. It not only gives me something else to help win battles, but it was fun in its own right. Stacking BP over the course of battles only to Beyblade let it rip when the time was right felt so damn satisfying, and this feeling is unique to Octopath Traveler alone. Enemy encounters and bosses suddenly become much faster paced and more hectic thanks to this addition, which is appreciated since enemies have a ton of HP, arguably too much in many instances. Around the beginning of the journey when I was still figuring out how to use it, let alone going through fights with a smaller party, I found battles took a little too long to get through. So like another JRPG we've covered recently, I felt like the punishment for not getting this mechanic is a little too punishing in the wrong way, but I got the hang of it a lot quicker this time. That being said, battles could still take a bit too long, especially if your selected party is unlucky with the area's enemies and their weaknesses. Targeting an enemy's weakness almost feels like a necessity, as I don't feel like I'm doing too much damage otherwise, but this might just be a result of the sound design. Attacks don't have the same impact as they do when an enemy's guard is down, so that probably played a role in making me feel this way. But I do think that the point still stands. Something that also played a factor in the length of battles is the slow animations across the board. Cooldown between attacks in different turns could have and should have been tightened up a lot more to make battles that much snappier, because the constant fighting wore on me a lot quicker than it would have thanks to this. Over time, I felt as if a lot of time was wasted because of how slow things move, and there isn't even a fast forward button of any kind to alleviate the issue. I get it, game, your animations are pretty, but I've seen the same thing a million times. Can we please pick up the pace? I know, I should relax and enjoy myself, and I am. Kinda. It's complicated. Let me put it like this. Battling at the start of the game was a lot of fun because these different gameplay mechanics work together very well. But after fighting, and fighting, and fighting, and fighting, I started to realize I've been doing the same crap since the beginning of the game. Battling got samey fast, and that's due to the fact that there aren't any added mechanics that shake things up too much. Sure, the secondary jobs help to keep things fresh as you've now got new options for your same party members, but like, that's it. There are no new major mechanics, no new characters to experiment with other than the 8 you're given at the start. Nothing. It feels kinda stale, resulting in my declining interest. I didn't feel any need to spend time mastering this combat system because I felt like there was nothing there for me to master. There are some cheap tricks and party combinations, sure, but give me something new, something more. I don't know, man, this is a long game and it felt long because Octopath Traveler failed to keep combat from becoming stagnant. My favorite turn-based combat games spread out the additional mechanics over the entire journey, but Octopath showed me its hand pretty quickly and I was having fun for a while, but these old tricks got old. In fact, battling became a little easy as things got closer to the end, barring a couple of difficulty spikes. I felt like whenever I'd finish a round of chapters, like everyone's chapter 2 or something, the first chapter, the new batch, would be a jump in difficulty that I would gradually overcome the further in that batch of chapters I'd get, and that was always a bit annoying, but manageable. Thankfully, I never felt a real need to grind in this game. Well, except for one instance. Or kinda, because I didn't do it. Remember that post-game dungeon that acts as a more satisfying end to the game's story? You wanna know why I said no to it? Because after every everyone's final chapters all recommending you to be around level 45, this piece of crap is only somewhat manageable in the low 70s. Excuse me? And keep in mind, I kept up with the side quests. I'm sure if these offered experience points as a part of their rewards, then I'd have been somewhat up to the task, but I ended my playthrough in the high 50s. There was no way in hell I was gonna grind my way up almost 20 levels just to do this one extra thing. I looked it up and you all on Twitter were right. Not worth it. It's a big ass boss rush featuring 8 battles back to 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 back with no damn save points, even before the true final boss. Screw that noise. But again, this feels unsatisfying, and now it's not just from a story perspective, but a gameplay one as well. Was there really no other way to challenge me one last time, taking all I learned into consideration? If anything, this kinda goes to show how, and I hate to say this, shallow the combat system is. Even for my least favorite form of RPG combat, I've seen better. This game is fun, don't get me wrong, but bare bones, and that's a bit of a shame as I was hoping for something to hold my attention over for longer. Man, I'm just realizing how much more negative this segment came off of than I wanted. Again, please don't get me wrong, combat is fun, but it could have been something more, and with as long as this game was, it really wore on me, and I wanted to highlight both my compliments and complaints with it as a whole. Not to mention, gameplay, more specifically combat, is what I feel to be the most important factor in a good RPG. So unpacking my feelings toward this game's battle system really helped put into perspective my overall feelings towards it. And I've gotta say, this is a weird game. What do you say we lay it all out? Octopath Traveler was a game made with the mindset of capturing that feeling from a time the developers described as the golden era of RPGs. A time when the game didn't hold your hand, when you could go wherever the hell you wanted in a new fantasy world, when character sprites left many scenes and specific emotions up to interpretation, when the story in general left a lot up to interpretation. Needless to say, the game's a clear, cut and dry labor of love, which shows in so many different areas, and under that lens, even a few of its shortcomings magically become lessened or even completely justified. It kinda depends on my mood. The game doesn't specifically tell you why the characters link up with each other because that's up to your imagination. As far as the game lets you know, regardless of a goal set in place, these 8 characters are travelers, going wherever you want to take them, to the point where the game gives you complete freedom on that very fact. The presentation has whispers of this glorified era in both graphical and audible prowess, and the combat system takes many elements of those classic RPGs while introducing new ones for the modern audience. In a sense, Octopath Traveler accomplished everything it wanted to do, but even still, we can go so much further with this type of game as it's one I really like, but also one that's really flawed. Characters don't interact, story elements go unaddressed, the overworld is bare bones, dungeons are bare bones, and combat starts off fun, but wears off once you realize that what you start with is essentially what you end with. As a result of all of this, the game feels like it's accomplishing the bare minimum of all it's set out to do, and that's kind of frustrating because the bare minimum is already pretty damn solid. We just need to push this sort of game further. If you're gonna give me total freedom choosing the order I recruit these characters, then you better give me ample reasons of justification as to why they'd work together. Add more travel banter. When I travel to see Haunted with Therian, have the two of them talk so I believe that they'd work together. Have the collective group of characters as a whole talk more often, allowing for different dynamics as the drip-fed party interaction left me severely wanting as a result of how good they were. This could also make way for replay value, as I'd miss out on scenes like Ophelia and Cyrus being my starting characters, or Primrose and Olberic. If you're gonna give me so much freedom in terms of how I start off my journey, give me the amount of content I expect out of it all to compensate. And give me a proper ending too. I shouldn't have to grind 20 levels at the last minute just because the only way to get the game's true closure is through what's essentially the EX dungeon. An EX dungeon is an extra dungeon, so if I feel like I'm missing out on a major part of the story as a result of not doing it, then something's wrong here. Get more creative with your overworlds, make dungeons more distinct from one another with the use of puzzles or anything, give me more to do in towns other than talking to everyone, and add more to your combat system. Or at least give me the illusion of more by spreading out the mechanics over the course of the game. Give me the feeling that I'm growing, not just as a result of my increased skill level, but as a result of more options opening up the further I get. I'm asking for a lot, but Octopath Traveler seems like a game that sets out to do a lot, hence my disappointment when I suddenly began to realize that wasn't the case. If it wasn't apparent enough, I think Octopath Traveler needs a sequel. One that hopefully takes some of my suggestions and general quality of life improvements into consideration, like, say, fully voicing the game, or I don't know, getting rid of random encounters or something. Chrono Trigger didn't have them, and that's an RPG from the golden era. I'm just saying. At the end of the day, despite all I've said and may have led you to believe, I do still love this game. I really do. The passion poured into the entire thing is very much apparent, and that'll always win me over. But at the same time, I do think the game had the potential to be among some of my favorite JRPGs, and I'd really like to see that potential tapped into. However, in the end, the game still won me over. The game won over a guy who isn't all that into the titles that inspired it. A guy who scoffs at titles with random encounters. A guy who would choose literally any other type of RPG over a turn-based one. This game beat the odds in every aspect, making me care more than I could have ever expected. And if anything, that right there speaks volumes for its quality. A charming love letter to the renaissance for my favorite genre, Octopath Traveler is a great time, and I truly hope to see more from this world sometime soon in the future.